The time is just gone 12 minutes past 9 as we continue with the second half of this morning's broadcast on News and Views with myself, Inayat Wadi. Now, this hour of News and Views is sponsored by Africa Muslims Agency. Africa Muslims Agency, a beacon of hope to communities for over 35 years in Africa and beyond. Now, still to come on the show right now is uh, 11 months today with the genocide in Gaza, and many of us have been in the state of sadness. We've seen a lot of mixed emotions, anger, and at the end of the day, it's all about becoming getting into a situation where we start to succumb to despair. And this is what we are going to be talking about right now in terms of not succumbing to despair, but more importantly, Palestinians that need our help. And I must say, the last 2 weeks with Yumna Al Saeed, Al Jazeera journalist, who was here in South Africa, it provided us with such a deep insight, not only on the public platform where she addressed the audiences, but personally for me, having accompanied Yumna Al Saeed throughout this entire tour, getting a deeper insight, a one-on-one, and really what we know is possibly maybe just a very, very small percentage, possibly around 5% of the horrors of Gaza, and people within Gaza that know people like Yumna Al Said, and also my guest who has written this piece saying we must not succumb to despair. Palestinians need our help. Are we talking with none other than digital strategy consultant and formerly with Al Jazeera and TRT in Turkey? We're talking with Mohammed Ziyaad, known as Ned Hassen. Mohammed Ziyaad, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me.
Yes, Jazakallah for your time with us this morning. And I was just actually reading this piece, and there's just so much that is actually flashing through my mind in my interaction with Yumna Al Said, saying, it's 11 months today, which is this genocide in Gaza. But there is just so much in this piece that you have written that provides a lot more detail, even a greater insight. And as you make mention, no amount of shocking images of dead Palestinian children and no amount of reports about war crimes being committed by Israel have managed to sway world leaders to actually do something. But at the end of the day, we are in the state of despair, but we need to continue regardless.
Yeah, so the article was actually written by a colleague of mine, Renee Lewis. She reached out to me a while ago to share the GoFundMe that she created of Karam and his five siblings. And having a look at it, I realized that I think earlier that day I was just thinking how many Palestinians have been killed, how many kids have been affected. And this was one campaign or one project where we have the agency to actually help like six kids to help one family. And I reached out to Renee and spoke to her and asked her, besides the GoFundMe, putting it online, what is she doing to create awareness or to raise money? So I started getting a lot more involved, and then we started chatting about what could be done aside from just like raising the money, in a broader sense, create like bringing out what the issues are. I think we've reached a point where we're fortunate in the sense that we can go on our phones and through Facebook, Instagram, we're hearing directly from the people in Gaza that are affected. We don't necessarily have to go through news organizations. But we have like Middle East Eye, Middle East Monitor, Al Jazeera, TRT World, AJ Plus. There's a lot of news organizations bringing us directly what's happening. And it does become overwhelming at times. I think there's periods where I stay off social media just because it becomes too much. But I think it's incumbent upon us to be engaging, to be sharing. But I feel that we reached a point where, like, the activism in the sense of just creating awareness or talking about the atrocities is quite demoralizing. And this was one specific campaign where I felt that I could personally do something tangible just to help, like, a smaller group of people. There's lots of fundraising taking place. There's lots of organizations doing work. I think the challenge now is that Gaza is completely blocked off, especially since the Rafah border is closed. So you can't actually get aid in, people can't actually leave. But in chatting with Renee, we spoke to a friend of hers that's in the West Bank. So Renee and I worked together in the US and in Qatar, and she lived in the West Bank prior to moving to Doha to Al Jazeera. So she has quite a few friends from the West Bank that are Palestinian that she's still in contact with. so she's able to get first-hand accounts. So we're still chatting with a group of others to see how do we take these voices and amplify it, because I think amplifying the Palestinian voices at this point is critical. And I think the tour that was done with Yumna was excellent. Unfortunately, I missed it. I've been out in bed with the flu, but it's something that we need to continue doing. Even there was a live stream last week held by one of the youngsters still at university, and it was a very young group of people that joined to discuss Palestine. And I think uh, as a South African society, we're quite moved by it. We've got the history, we've got the knowledge. There is a lot of activities taking place. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily coordinated or structured in any way, but I think in these things it never will actually happen or take place. But I think we need to continue having having these discussions with organizations, with groupings. I think within South Africa, and also reaching out to people that are active in doing things outside of South Africa. Because even in speaking to Renee, she's living in a small Midwestern town in Washington State. There's no real activities, there's no markets, there's no fundraising, there's nothing taking place. So I think like the online platform is a space where we can have these discussions. I think not just of what's happening now, but what can we do to assist. And I think it's important for us to start moving that discussion away from damnation of Israel, but rather more towards what's our agency, because and what can we do so we don't succumb to despair.
Well, Mohammed Ziad, what you are saying is obviously a very, very telling statement, because this was the point that Yumna Said also made, that, we we'll scroll through our phone, you'll watch a TikTok video, you'd be sad, you would be angered, you would have all these emotions. And that's as far as it goes when that video clip finish, and then you continue scrolling. But more importantly, like you're talking about the GoFundMe campaign, is what we can actually do. Because the story of this family that you are talking about is a story of thousands upon thousands of families who are living it in Gaza right now as we speak. And also in this piece, it talks about Egyptian brokers. It talks about $5,000 per person, the exploitation of people at a time of misery as well. Now, all of this we need to take into account, and at the end of the day, to give hope to people, and also at the same time, it gives us just so much more, I would say, meaning to the cause in supporting the people of Palestine when you actually do something about it.
Yeah, and I think being moved to action is a critical thing that we need to do. If we're just sitting and just absorbing this information, it does become a bit much. But I find like I'm seeing a lot of individuals doing things to like fundraise. I think being active, doing something in any particular way makes some sort of difference. There's a lot of like movies and documentaries available. So I think even if it's small little initiatives that people are able to do, just get group of people together, watch these documentaries, watch what's happening, understanding the history of Palestine, understanding what has happened. Um, like I think empowering ourselves, educating ourselves makes us like a lot stronger, gives us context into what has happened, like how have we reached this point. Um, and I think it comes down to empowerment. If we as a community stand firm behind Palestinians and we want to assist them, how can we assist them in what way? What's our skill sets? What's our knowledge base? And I think if we're lacking in that regard, we need to increase that. And like through like education and just reading or watching documentaries is like the most basic thing. And then from there, look at like campaigns like GoFundMe, supporting different organizations. And I think as a Muslim community, we're drawn more towards fundraising rather than activism and advocacy. And I think we're fortunate in South Africa. The BDS movement is quite strong. There's the Palestine Solidarity Committee, the Palestine Solidarity Alliance, and there's like activists that have been at it for years that have a lot of knowledge and contacts, and it's something we can actually draw on. So for me, my message to the listeners or viewers is get involved in some way. Um, like as you mentioned that aside from this family, there's so many other families suffering similar fates. So even one of the discussions that we were looking at is, can families in South Africa adopt a family in Gaza? Now is not necessarily the time to implement something like that, but if we came together as a collective and looked after a family of four or five to ensure like what are their needs financially for schooling, in terms of medical, in terms of trauma, it's a more sort of holistic approach to be able to assist someone. I think the idea of just coming across a compelling piece of content and sharing it on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, it plays a role, but I'm sure, like, I think we are capable of doing more. And I think it's the same thing with like giving money. I think we can just give money, but uh, getting more involved is something that is needed. Granted, Gaza is cut off, but I think we need to start looking at ways to be able to assist in a more constructive manner.
Yes, and also I think, as you mentioned, in a more constructive manner, but also being strategic about it. And I know, you actually, let's say, a very, very strong telling point on your side, in terms of being strategic, but pure again from a media perspective. And I heard you talking about advocacy as well. And again, utilizing whatever we have in terms of resources in being strategic from a media perspective as well, whether you're on social media, whether you're on mainstream media, whether you're on independent alternative media like we are here at Salam Media as well. That advocacy is absolutely important. But together with media advocacy, it's about being an activist. And being an activist is not only someone who would go out and protest on the streets. I mean, you can do activism in more ways than one, in providing support, strategic support, when and where it is needed, Mohammed Ziad.
Yeah, no, definitely, without a doubt. And I think, like, as a if like with this campaign, like the idea is we're trying to raise $40,000, and that's a lot of money. And if you convert the dollars to rands, it becomes like almost unattainable. So the mentality we looked at was getting South Africans to share the message and try doing fundraising in the US, the UK, and the Gulf, especially because with the exchange rate, it becomes a lot more effective. And I think as a community in South Africa that is very vocal, we able to create that advocacy. I think after the ICJ, especially because of the history we've been through apartheid, because of our collective experience, Muslims or activists throughout the world look to South Africa. And I feel that as a collective community, we need to sort of take that step forward. Not necessarily to have that collective voice. I don't think that would ever necessarily take place. But I think just in being a lot more proactive than we currently have been. I think over this past year, South Africa has, and South African Muslims collectively have been quite vocal. Uh, but I do feel that we're lacking in the sense that our focus is still on fundraising. Like every weekend or even online, there's little initiatives taking place where people are raising money. And I think the issue is that it's difficult to sort of get that money across. But I think that space of advocacy is where we're lacking. Just to sort of find resources, I think collective documentary screenings, production of like materials, just discussions taking place about what like the history of Palestine. Because I found there's a lot of young people that don't necessarily know the history of Palestine. They don't know how Israel was brought into existence. They don't necessarily understand that Gaza and the West Bank are completely separated. And the fact that the West Bank itself is crafted up into Bantustans and there's no freedom of movement from one city to another. Like a Palestinian in the West Bank can't go to Gaza. So it's basic things that we don't know as a community. And I feel that if we're standing strong to say we support Palestine and we support the Palestinians, like it is incumbent upon us to understand what's actually taking place, what the history is, what the issues are, so that we're more empowered in being able to assist.
Yes, Mohammed Ziad. In fact, what you're saying is very true, because I think being with you now said as well, and it was towards the end of almost every engagement she had with the public, is this message of educating yourself, educate your children, informing them, talk about Palestine, the history, the culture, what the colors of Palestine mean, the cities in Palestine, call them by their names as well. And I think, armed with all of that information, actually just enhances this desire desire for advocacy, this desire to assist wherever we can. And the article also speaks about this is individually, if we are empowered with the right information, we can make a difference individually rather than even collectively, because we know we're not going to be able to stop this genocide, but in more ways than one, there's a lot more that can be done if we are armed with the right information.
Yeah, and I think like the overwhelming thing is one person can't necessarily do anything. But if we get together with like friends or family or just like-minded individuals, just have discussions about what can be done, organically little initiatives come up. And I think any small initiative that comes up has value. For instance, last week in Greenside, there was a market that took place, and this market was largely arranged by um, Muslim women in our community, and most of them were like grandmothers. And it was a great initiative with them. You're not expecting them at their age to go and organize protests or be out in the street or even sharing as much on social media. But collectively, they came together and they had this lovely market, and it still creates that awareness. So I think in any way that we're able to, whatever we're able to do with the skill set and knowledge we have, we should be doing something. I think just sitting back and watching things on TV or watching like videos on TikTok, it it creates that awareness. But we need to move past that. We need to watch at least longer form documentaries, read books, like educate ourselves, speak to people about it, hold sort of events, because the devastation that's being faced in Palestine um, is quite severe. I like we're coming to a year of this, and I think it is a genocide. And I think, as you mentioned, knowing the cities, knowing the history, we need to work with the Palestinian people to keep that history alive, to keep that the focus going. And it's a role that we as a South African community or even international community are able to play in this.
Yes, Mohammed Ziyaad. In fact, I'm just looking at the banner and the poster, the image on the screen right now as we are talking, and I see there is the GoFundMe appeal for people to donate to help these six kids and their families evacuate Gaza. At this point in time, $9,600 have been raised, and the target is $40,000 US dollars. So we will continue sharing this. We will continue making this appeal out to our listeners and our viewers this morning, inshallah. And just in terms of GoFundMe, just some information. Who do we contact? If people need to get in touch with you, Mohammed Ziad.
So I'll share the GoFundMe link with you. I don't know if you're able to put that up somewhere on your social media. And Renee wrote a really good article, opinion piece on Al Jazeera. That I highly suggest people watch that site. Yeah, you can get in touch with me on social media, or I can forward my contact details if they would like to get involved. We currently focusing on this campaign, but there's a group of students from the university and a few others from South Africa and outside South Africa. We're looking at how do we consolidate this campaign and how do we look at other GoFundMes, because there are many families and many individuals that need assistance. And we're trying to see what can be done. One of the suggestions were, when the fighting, like when the war ends and the fighting stops, can we work with young Palestinians in getting them empowered so that they could actually do, if they could work as like journalists almost, or on the ground journalists, create user generated content um, from Gaza and send it over to like send it over online. So that way they empowered, and we're taking money from outside of Gaza to send to Gaza. And so we're discussing and looking at what's possible, different ideas. I think it's a matter of empowerment. Uh, People from Palestine themselves don't necessarily want charity. They they are very strong people, and I think we tend to sometimes forget that. So it's an issue of empowerment. But before we even speak about empowerment, we need to realize that they do require that assistance, and the war is still going on. But we we're trying to have the discussion about, once the war ends, what can we assist in a more healthy manner. Right now, since everything is closed, the family Karam and his siblings can't exactly evacuate because the Rafah border is closed as well. But the idea would be that if they can't evacuate, whatever money we raise, they'll use in Gaza to rebuild their lives. The idea was for them to leave just so they can get like medical treatment, be reunited with their father that's in the West Bank, and then go either be in the West Bank or go back to Gaza. They don't necessarily want to leave and escape Gaza. And I think it's a very noble thing, and it's something that we need to remember.
Well, Jazakallah khairan for that. And, we will obviously get your details from you. We will obviously put up on our social media platforms. We'll be sharing that as well. So, but for now, Jazakallah khairan so much for that and for your time with us this morning, Muhammad Ziyaad. Have yourself a wonderful Jummah, inshallah, and wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for having me.
Okay, Mohammed Ziyaad Ned Hassan with us this morning. And next up, we will be joined by Sheikh Riyad Fattar, the I am Hamas statement that he had made in Cape Town at our event on Sunday. And this has come under fire from the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. We will be talking with Sheikh Riyad Fattar personally this morning, right here after this.